much, the first point I want to make is the one that I started on before, how much detail. I've already said that we really need a lot of detail, enough so that the reviewer not only understands what methods you're proposing, but is confident that you can carry them out. And I use this quote from an NIH program officer. It's a quote for new investigators. And it's kind of brutal, but I want you to remember it because I don't want you to give short shrift to this section. NIH program officer to new investigators. While you may assume that reviewers are experts in the field and familiar with current methodology, they will not make the same assumption about you. Ouch, it's rough. So I included it not to scare you, but to really hammer you. You need to include detail. So research design and methods. The most common thing we see about this section, the most common mistake, as I said, people present it almost like a cookbook. They'll give you lists of experiments, lists of group sizes, lists of statistical tests, and it really does read, add this, add this, add this, and you come up with your result. What do your reviewers want? They want more than that. They want to look at this section, read it, and know that you have the ability to think knowledgeably, logically, thoroughly. They want to look at possible interpretations. Are you not just proposing what it is you're going to do, but can you talk about what possible outcomes you anticipate? Not just what you're going to do, but what you anticipate finding. Not just how you're going to do it, but what difficulties may arise and how you'll address those difficulties if they do indeed arise. Look at this quote. This came from a recent summary statement to a new investigator at my institution, and I think this quote really speaks volumes. The reviewer wrote, a new investigator is given leeway with some aspects of the grant, such as preliminary data. That's good news and it's appropriate. However, that same new investigator is not given any leeway if he or she is overconfident in his approach and does not include anticipated results or does not include plans for addressing potential problems. So very harsh criticism, and that grant indeed was not funded, and the primary reason was that this person went with one approach and didn't talk about what could happen using that approach. How important was it? He rewrote and included potential problems, anticipated outcomes, and it wasn't being funded. So how do we structure research design and methods? Again, when we get to research design and methods, will our reviewers remember everything that we've written? Probably not. So do that one paragraph overview. I always think of it as like a mental heads up, where I sort of summarize what it is I'm doing. Over the next 5 years, we propose this series of experiments in order to determine the following. So it's an overview, a summary, a paragraph. Then, and this, again, there are many ways to organize a grant, but to my mind, the most important part of research design and methods is that it's an exact corollary to aims. What do I mean by that? We're going to structure this whole section according to those 3 or 4 specific aims that we had originally. So we're going to repeat each aim verbatim. Aim 1, to develop, do whatever. Then we're going to have 2 big components, design, methods. Aim 2, design, methods. And now I'm going to show you what to put into those components. I'm going to show you how it looks. First, I don't want you to read this. I want you to see how this looks. I chose specific aim 2 from the grant that I wrote. But look at this. I said aim, design, methods. Aim, I repeated verbatim. That was my specific aim 2. For design, I talked about my rationale as part of my design. Then I gave an explicit description of the research design for that particular project. Then I gave my methods. Just looking at the heading, methods, I had a distance learning technology component tutorial. So again, lots of headings. Aim, design, methods. Aim, design, methods. Before I turn to discuss with you about what goes in design, in order to see another example of how to present research design and methods, and it's the exact same approach, honestly, that I'm showing you here, but just so you have variety. If you look at the useful NIH websites, the first handout in the book, under examples of grants, so it's the heading right in the middle of that useful NIH websites page, under annotated R01 grant application or under the model of a K. The R01 I think is particularly insightful for this point because you see the level of detail that this new investigator used. And when you see it, it just takes your breath away. It is so detailed, the research design and methods that's included on the, as the model on the website. It takes your breath away, but that's a good thing. You'd rather feel shocked looking at that example than shocked looking at your own summary statement, which criticizes you for lack of detail. And I can tell you right off the bat, number one criticism of research design and methods from new investigators, number one, number two, and number three, all rolled into one, insufficient detail. Insufficient detail for me to be able to evaluate this research design and methods, by far the top criticism. So, before we look at methods, let's look at design. And I'm giving you headings here. Use these, take them with a grain of salt. They're not all going to be the right headings for you, but it gives you some standard headings that I hope will be useful to most of you, just as a model. Some people put parts of what I'm going to include in the methods. Doesn't really matter where you put them. For example, some people put data in the methods. Some people put anticipated outcomes in methods or potential problems in methods. Doesn't matter where you put it. But I think these in general are very helpful headings that reviewers tend really to like. So for whatever it's worth, here are some headings that I hope will be a useful model. First, study design. And I always give a rationale. When I talk about the design of my study, I don't just say, we're going to use this study design. Boom, that's the end of it. No, this is why we chose this particular study design. This is my rationale. We looked at other potential or possible study designs. We considered them. However, we didn't use this particular study design because we didn't have the requisite number of patients to be able to do a prospective randomized controlled trial. That wasn't possible. Therefore, we adopted this other approach. In order to address any concerns about statistical significance, since we use this other design, this is what we did. So not just this is the design, but I'm showing my thinking, my thinking. So I'm always going the extra step in this research design and methods. And there's one thing I want you to remember. It's that what's going to separate your grant from all those other very talented new investigators who are competing against you, show your thinking in this section. So study design, protocol, and in a minute I give you some subheads for a protocol that you can use or not as a, again, I hope it'll be useful to you. Data, I'm going to say a few words about. Anticipated outcomes, and I want to pause on this. Reviewers love this section. I'm going to show you an example of how to write that and how to write the potential problems in a moment, so bear with me for a minute. What I want to say about anticipated outcomes is that reviewers just salivate when they see this as a subhead, anticipated outcomes. It's like, oh my gosh, this young investigator, this new investigator, didn't just tell me what they're going to do. They've really gone the extra mile. They've thought about what outcomes they're likely to get, and they're talking to me about how this research is likely to turn out and what it will mean if it turns out this way, what it will mean if it turns out this way. This is great. They've really done a lot of thinking here. It is rarely included. It is so rare that you see this section. Whenever you see it as a reviewer, you automatically, it's not like you give points for a certain section, but it certainly adds so much to your positive impression of this grant. Impossible to overstate how much reviewers love this one. Potential problems, the hardest part of this section to write. You can really, really do damage to yourself when you write this section, so I'm going to spend a minute talking to you about what we include. And I give you a heads up, as I hope you would imagine, we only include problems that we can address. We never include problems that we have no clue what we'll do if they arise. Okay? So problem and how we'll address it. And you would be amazed how many people include problems that would totally derail the research. A potential problem is that native Hawaiian elders may be very resistant to this type to participation in this type of study. There's long been a resistance